It is time for us to finish the book of Judges, and I don't know that we'll be able to finish it. And can we just go ahead and finish up Samson by saying, and Samson died? Is that all right? I mean, we know that story about Samson, and we spent a lot of time last week, but I want us to spend time looking at the last 4 chapters in the book of Judges that nobody ever reads. Nobody ever hardly even knows that they're in the Bible. But before we do that, let's spend a little bit of time looking at the judges. Can anybody tell me the names of the judges while you're looking at me? All right, let's start together. Othniel, Ehud. Wait a minute, what do you know about Ehud? He's the left-handed guy. Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah. And then there's that father and son judges. One of them had an army. How many men in that army? That's Gideon's army of 300 and his son Abimelech. And Abimelech tried to become king. In fact, he wanted to be king. And they first wanted Gideon to be king. And Gideon said, I'm a judge. God is your king. We got to understand that they had a king and it was God. The judges were just God's representatives here on this earth, and they rejected God when they asked to be kings. And eventually, as we go study through the Bible, we'll learn about that time when they finally decide they do not want Samuel and his sons to be ruler over them. And then there is the next judge. Now, you may think that those are 3 judges, but if you will learn to say these 3 judges together, Tola, Jair, Jephthah, then that might help you understand. There are 3 judges, but there's just a couple of verses about Tola, a couple of verses about Jair, and then there's that story about Jephthah. And he's the one who said, God, let me win the battle, and whatever comes out of my house, I'll offer it as a sacrifice. And so we need to be aware of that. And then there's that next group of 3 judges. Can anybody give me the name? Somebody's looking at the screen. Can anybody give me the names of those next 3 judges? Ibzan, Elon, Abdon. How does that sound? Okay. And so we've got Tola, Jair, Jephthah, and then we've got Ibzan, Elon, Abdon. And those are 2 verses about each of them. Doesn't mean they're not important. Doesn't mean they're less important. God's trying to give us an overview of the Bible and the things that are being transpired in that. And then there are those the final judges. And Samson is the one that we talked about last week. Spent a lot of time talking about Samson, and I hope we know the details of Samson's life. Delilah was not his wife. Samson was an immoral person in many respects. But let me point out this. Samson is in Hebrews 11. In a chapter that talks about men of great faith. Samson is included. I don't think many of us would have put Samson in that list. You know, he's too immoral, you know, but he's in that list. And so that's God's evaluation of him, just like Jephthah is in that list. And he said, and then look who's not in the list that's there. Where's David in the heroes of faith? And Elijah and Elisha, where are those other great characters of faith? They're not in that chapter. But these are the 15 judges. And so we've talked about the circle of the judges and everything that's involved. And this circle of the judges starts off, if you'll think about the 12 o'clock, where the hands of a clock might appear at 12 o'clock, they're faithful to God. When Joshua's there, when that generation that is there with Joshua's generation, they're faithful to God. But then, after that generation dies, they become unfaithful and turn to idolatry, and as a result of that, God lets the nations come in and oppress them. And so if you'll see the hands of the clock, at 3 o'clock you've got idolatry, at 6 o'clock they are oppressed, and when they're oppressed, they finally turn back to God, and so God raises up a deliverer, a judge. And this circle is it's not emphatically there, mentioned 15 times, but that's what's happening in the period of Judges. And it's what happens to a lot of us in our own lives. There are times when we're spiritual and things start going pretty good, and all of a sudden we lose the spirituality. And so we just need to be aware of all of that. When they got into the promised land, and this is really a part of tonight's lesson, the land was divided tribally. Moses gave the instructions. Joshua, when they get into the land, gives some additional instructions. And so what this map seeks to do is to represent where approximately the tribes were found. Now, you may check in the back of your Bible, and you may find that the tribe of Dan may be right down in this area, in the back of your Bible. That was the land that God intended for the tribe of Dan to have. And so tonight, in tonight's lesson, we're going to find Dan is all the way up there to the top. I don't know if you can see that and read it clearly enough or not, but that's where the tribe of Dan ended up. And that's a part of these chapters that are here. And so when you get to these last chapters, look at the last verse in Judges chapter 16. Judges in the Old Testament, right? Judges chapter 16, you get to the last verse, and the Bible said he judged Israel 20 years. And so we got the life of Samson. He's a judge for 20 years. And let me just emphasize something again. And Rick Hall's I want to brag on him every time he does, every time I think about this. And you remember what Rick said. If you think about Samson being like LeBron James, the miracle of Samson is even greater if you make him a little short Jewish person. I mean, you stop and think about it. We see Samson being this massively huge man when he takes the gates of those cities and carries them out, and whenever he pulls down these pillars, at the time of his death. But God doesn't need LeBron James to accomplish His work. And I think Rick was saying, I don't know this, but have you ever thought about the fact that the impact that Samson would have on the people would be far, far greater if he's just a normal guy who has supernatural strength that God gives to him. Now, when you come to these closing chapters, and that's what we're going to try to do tonight, is to look at these closing chapters. Let me point out the fact that these last chapters, starting in chapter 17 and going through verse 21, these chapters are not chronologically placed in the book of Judges. The first 16 chapters are chronological. It's Othniel, and then Ehud, and then Shamgar, and then Deborah, and then Gideon. But when you get to the life of Samson, there's almost a flashback, because these things that happen in chapter 17 are a reflection of the things that happen. They could have happened at any time, so we'll be able to figure out at least some of them, be able to figure them out. And the way we know this is found in chapter 20, verse 23. Look at that, and that'll help us understand that it is not chronological. I've got the right verse. Seems like it's not on the right place on the page. It should be verse 28. I don't know if I have 23 on the screen. It should be verse 28. Verse 28. Verse starting in 27. The children of Israel inquired of the Lord. The ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before stood before Israel in that day. So here is, here's the grandson of Aaron. And so you don't get the grandson of Aaron. Aaron's out in the time of Moses. And so we're not the generation of Joshua. That would be Eleazar. But you got Phinehas. And so we're talking about Jonathan's grandson, or pardon me, talking about Aaron's grandson. And so that won't get you 300 years away. And that's one of the ways that we know these things are not chronological. And Richard, whenever you taught and introduced the book of Judges, you pointed out something that is really, really important, and that is the Bible said there was no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. And that's what chapter 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21, that's what these last 5 chapters show. That without direction in life, you can go, your life's going to get messed up. And we're about to see that in some things that we are not aware of. I've got a verse in Deuteronomy that, I've found it at least 4 times in the book of Judges. Didn't do an extended research. Richard, I thought maybe you found a verse early in one of the earlier chapters says, every man did that which was right in his own eyes. I think that's in chapters 2 or 3, but didn't get that on the screen. But you see in chapter 17, it's in verse 6, chapter 18, 1, chapter 19, verse 1, and chapter 21, verse 25, it just says something like there was no king in Israel, and sometimes it says, and there was no king in Israel. Every man did what he wanted to. Do your own thing. And without direction from God, that's what's going to happen. You want to know how they turn to idols? We are about to discover how they turned away from God, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. There was no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Let's look at a story about by a man by the name of Micah. Now, this is not Micah who writes one of the books in the Bibles later on. It's another Micah. And so here is this man by the name of Micah, and he was of the mountains of Ephraim. His name was Micah, and he says to his mother, the 1,100 shekels of silver that was taken from you and on which you put a curse, even saying it in my ear, here's the silver with me. I took it. And his mother said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my son. So here is this son. I don't know how I got 700 shekels. 1,100 shekels went missing. And Micah's mother pronounced a curse upon that money, and Micah comes and said, I took it. And she says, bless you, my son. And so I'm not sure everything that's involved in the fact that he took it, but the mother says, bless you. And so they take that silver, I think it was made of silver, and they make an idol of it. Verse 3, when he had returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I've wholly dedicated the silver from my hand to the Lord for my son to make a carved image and a molded image. Now therefore I will return it to you. So he brings the money back, and some way this mother has said, I've dedicated part of this money to God. And here's the way I dedicated it to the Lord. How could you dedicate to the Lord making of an idol? Very easy. If you're going to do what's right, if every man's going to do what's right in his own eyes. Yeah, and this is an illustration of it. Makes an idol, says, I'm dedicating this idol to the Lord. Hello, golden calf, Mount Sinai. Remember what happened there? Every man doing what's right in his own eyes, and so she makes this carved image. And he returned the silver to his mother, and she took 200 shekels of silver and gave it to the silversmith, and he carved an image and a molded image, and they were in the house of Micah. The man Micah had a shrine and made an ephod, that's a garment that they wore, and household idols. And so now we not only have the idol made of silver, but we got the other idols that have been made. What's that? That's second or third of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not make unto thyself what? An engraven image. But if you're doing what's right in your own eyes, I don't care what God said. So he builds a shrine. And so he's got his idol that he's made. He's got the ephod that a priest might wear, and these other idols. And he takes one of his sons, and he makes that son his priest. I thought priests could only come from the tribe of Levi. You don't have to do what God says. If every man's going to do what's right in his own eyes, so he can step outside, and this man is from Ephraim, and Ephraim is what? Right up in that area that's there. And so he's got this shrine that's there. Now then, in those days, verse 6, there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. And there's a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah. He was a Levite and was staying there. Hello? Now we got a Levite And the man departed from the city of Bethlehem in Judah to stay wherever he could find a place. He sounds almost like a homeless person. He's a Levite. He's in Bethlehem. That's not one of the Levitical cities. And he's staying there in Bethlehem, and he's trying to find a place that he might live. And he comes to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah as he journeyed. And Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" He said, "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem, and I'm on my way to find a place to stay." And Micah said to him, "Dwell with me and be a father," spiritual obviously, "and a priest to me. And I will give you 10 shekels of silver per year, a suit of clothes, and your sustenance." So the Levite went in. How on earth could this happen? Very easily. If you ignore what God said, you want to do what's right in your own eyes, what's wrong with this? And I think it's rather interesting as you read these last 5 chapters of the book of Judges. That's what you're going to find. Everybody's going to invent their own religion, do their own thing, and get whatever answer they want from whatever gods that are there. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in the house of Micah. Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will be good to me because I have a Levite as a priest." How can you say that? It's easy. If you're deciding what's right and what's wrong, just because a man says it doesn't make it true. And so here's a man doing what's right in his own eyes, and he said, "Well, I'm doing what God said. I got me a Levite." Well, there's 2 or 3 things wrong with that. Remember the altars, where the altars and the sacrifices were to be offered, and it certainly is not a family matter. Now then, the next verse says, and this is in chapter 18, "In those days there was no king in Israel, and the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in, for until that day their inheritance among the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them." The reason it had not fallen to them was that after Joshua's death, he said, "Now you make sure you drive out the rest of these tribes." And as I said, in some maps, it'll show the tribe of Dan down in that area. They never took the land. They were living there, but they didn't really have a possession. And so the children of Dan pick out 5 men of their families from their territory to spy out the land and search it. They said, "Go search the land." So they went to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and they lodged there. So here these men in this area where Dan is, they go up to the mountains of Ephraim, and guess what? They happen to arrive at Micah's house. And while they were at the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. They turned aside and they said, "Who brought you here?" I wonder how they could recognize his voice and know he was not from there. Anybody ever heard of accents? If you hear somebody say, it cost a boot $5. You ever hear anybody say a boot? I thought there was only Canadians that said that, but there's some folks up in Lake City. I was preaching in a meeting up in Lake City. Instead of saying about, like anybody had half a brain would say, they say a boot. It's about this. And there are accents all over the place. And how in this church with 21 nationalities, 22 nationalities, there are a lot of accents. And they immediately said, "What are you doing here? And who brought you here? And what do you have here?" And he said, "Thus and so, and Micah did for me. He has hired me, and I've become his priest. Please," so they said to him, "inquire of God that we may know whether the journey in which we will go will be prosperous." And so they say to this priest, "You go inquire of God." What's his God? It's that idol that's out there. And he comes out, and the priest said, "Go in peace. The presence of the Lord will be with you on your way." Does that make it true? Nope. Just because a man makes a statement that says that it is true, that does not make it true. Long story short, the 5 men departed and went all the way up to this area, way up here, to a place called, what's the name of that place? Laish? I thought it had a K in it. But and they arrived at that place, and they saw the people there, how they dwelt safely in the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. Where is Sidon? Sidon is a Phoenician city as we know it that would be right up in this area, right along the seacoast. There is a place, and evidently the people up in this area were sort of a protectorate of the people from Sidon. But the mountains of Lebanon, you know, the mountains of Lebanon where the big cedars came from that they built the temple out of, mountains of Lebanon are 11,000 feet. And so here's the Sidonians, they're along the seacoast, get up to 11,000 feet, come down on the other side, and so you've got these people over in that land, and they had no ties with anyone, even though they were far from the Sidonians. Then the spies came back to their brethren, and they said, "What's your report?" And he says, "Let's go against them. We can get up there, and we can take that land, and that will be the place where we need to go. And when you go, you'll find a secure people and a large land, for God has given it into your hands." Where'd you learn that? Micah's priest, the Levite down there, said God's given it to us. That make it true? Nope. But if you don't going to do what's right in your own eyes, one message is as good as another. And so they go up and they encamp that place, and they passed from the mountains of Ephraim and came back to the house of Micah. And the 5 men remember the idols that's there. We'll have to skip some of the story. And so the 5 men say to the priest, he says, "Come and go with us." Where is that? Yes. So they turned aside and came to the house of the young Levite, the house of Micah, and greeted him. 600 men armed of the children of Dan stood by at the entrance. The 5 men who had gone up to spy out the land. The priest stood at the entrance. They go into Micah's house, take the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image. And the priest said, "What are you doing?" They said, "Shut up. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us. Be a father and a priest to us. It's better for you to be a priest to the household. Is it better to be to one household or to be a priest to an entire tribe?" So he's for sale, like we didn't know that. You know, Micah gave him 10 shekels a year, and now got an entire tribe. And so they steal Micah's idol. It's been made out of the money he stole from his mother, and they carry that idol up to the tribe of Dan. And look at the last verse 26. The children of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw they were too strong for him, he turned back. Let's see. Yes, verse 30. The children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershon, the son of Manasseh, marginal reading, by the way, the son of Moses. If you've got marginal reading, and so this may be this Jonathan may be the name of the Levite. It certainly looks like it. And Jonathan, the son of Gershon, the son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests to the tribe of David until the days of the captivity. And there's some question about however long that is, but until whatever he has in mind when he says the days of captivity. Right up here in the most remote place away from Jerusalem and away from where the Jews are, they've got their own idols up there, and the idols are telling them everything they ought to do. And so now, well, we've got that message. Change of pace. The next chapter talks about when Micah lost his own gods, and I guess we've covered all that, haven't we? I was talking did not change this as I should have. So now then, go to the next chapter, and there's a brand new Levite introduced. Not related at all, another story. Here's what happens when you do everything that's right in your own eyes. In those days, when there was no king in Israel, you hear in the background, does your mind not echo? Everybody's doing what's right in his own eyes. There is this man who is a Levite staying in the remote mountains of Ephraim. So evidently not on the eastern side that might get very close to being over near the Jordan, but in the most remote part of it. There's a Levite, do not know his name. He took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. A concubine's what? Can we say a wife who's not involved in the inheritance? Doesn't mean there was not love at all, but she was not involved in the inheritance. Now, God was very specific about who the Levites could marry. We don't have time to examine all of that, but you can take any woman you want to, if you're doing everything that's right in your own eyes. And so he takes this woman, and she is such a wonderful wife. Verse 2, his concubine played the harlot against him and went from him to her father's house in Bethlehem and was there for 4 months. Gets his wife, evidently carries her back back up to the mountains of Ephraim, and she becomes a prostitute, immoral woman, and says, I think I'll just go back home to Daddy. Well, he still loves her. It's evidence of her. Verse 3, the husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her and to bring her back. And he takes a servant, a couple of donkeys with him. I suspect the donkey is so she'll have something to ride on. That's my imagination, but that's sort of what makes sense to me. So she brought him in. So she brought him into her father's house, and when the father of the young man saw him, he was glad to meet him. Now the father-in-law, the young woman's father, detained him and says, just stay 3 days. So they ate and drank and lodged there, and it came to pass on the 4th day, he rose up early in the morning, and he was ready to depart. But the young woman's father said to his son-in-law, refresh your heart with a morsel of bread, and afterwards go your way. So they sat down, and they ate and drank together. The young woman's father said to the man, please be content to stay all night, let your heart be merry. So it's day 4, still hasn't left. He arose early on the 5th day. That's verse 8. And the young woman's father says, please refresh your heart. So they delayed into afternoon. Do fathers have any trouble giving up their daughters in marriage? You know, you stop and think about it. A part of wedding ceremonies is the bride and her father walk down the aisle. What's the preacher ask? Who gives this woman in marriage? Difficult for fathers to give them up. And those who've had daughters may understand that. I want my daughter here. And so he just delays him and delays him. And so this individual finally leaves. I forgot to change all of this. And so he goes on his journey. They get near the city of Jerusalem. It's called the city of the Jebusites. That's in verse 11. They came near Jebus. Jebus had another name, Salem. And so the Jebusites are the ones who live there. And so Salem, remember Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God? This is a location. Now, at this time, the Jebusites are living in this city. And so the city was also called Jebusalem. And to make it easier to pronounce, that's where the name Jerusalem came from. And so he says, I am not going to go into this pagan city. So nearby is a place called Gibeah. And they go and they finally arrive in Gibeah. They go into the place. They go down to the open market. And does this sound about the people that went into Lot's city? You remember when they went into Sodom? It's almost parallel to that. And but no one would take them into the house that night. Evidently, it was the common custom. If there's a stranger in here, we take them in. But nobody did. And there was an old man that came from his work in the field at evening, and he was from the mountains of Ephraim. He says, what's going on here? And he says, well, they will not accept me. So he says, where are you going? Where do you come from? That's in verse 17. We're passing from Bethlehem in Judah toward the remote mountains of Ephraim. I am from there. I went to Bethlehem. Now I've got a wife. Now I'm headed home. We can't find a place to stay. Verse 19, we've got straw and fodder for our donkeys and bread and wine for myself and for the young man who is with your servants. There's no lack of anything. That's what the old man said. The old man said, peace with you. Let all your deeds be my responsibility. Do not spend the night in the open square. So he brings them into the house, gave fodder to the donkeys, and they washed their feet and ate and drank. Pretty good story so far. Now you're about to, sounds like what's happening in Sodom is about to happen in Gibeah. As they were enjoying themselves, certain men of the cities, perverted men, surrounded the house, beat on the doors, and they spoke to the master of the house, bring out the man who came to your house that we may know him. And the translators in italics in my Bible has the word carnally. That's what they mean, like Adam knew his wife. That we may know these men. And the man says, the man feels a responsibility. Like Lot felt the responsibility for those heavenly beings in his house, Lot offered his own daughters. And look what this man does. We don't understand it. It doesn't fit our culture by a long, long way. But he says, here's my virgin daughter. And the man's concubine. Let me bring out my daughter and bring out this man's concubine. She's not really his wife. She's sort of his wife. And you do with them whatever you want to. And they said, he says, but to this man, do no such vile thing. But the men would not heed. They were homosexual in their desires. But they take the woman and the concubine, bring her out, and they knew her and abused her all night until the morning. When the day began to break, they let her go. The man came as the day was dawning, fell down at the door of the man's house where the master was till it was light. And when the master rose, opens the door, there's the concubine fallen at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. And he said to her, "Get up," and let us be going. There was no answer, so the man lifted her up onto the donkey, and the man got up and went to his place. He entered the house, took a knife, laid hold on his concubine, and divided her into 12 pieces. She's dead. He chops her up into 12 pieces. And you see that, limb by limb? And sends her throughout all of the country. And so every man doing what's right in his own eyes, this way I'm going to handle this. And so he's up in Gibeah. Gibeah is just a little bit north of Jerusalem, right in this area. And he chops this concubines out, and here all of the 12 tribes, and he sends a part of this concubine to all of these tribes that are there. And verse 30 says, it was so that when they saw it, they said, no such deed has been done or seen from the day the children of Israel came up from the land of Egypt unto this day. Consider it, confer, and speak up. And so now, in chapter 20, the people come together. And I ought to give this, change the slides to somebody else. I get so excited telling the story. But they get together. And the people of Israel said, we have got to do something about this. This has not been done, and it does not need to be a part of the lifestyles, the lifestyles that we have here. So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to respond, and they call an assembly of the people together, and that's when you get to chapter 20. The tribes of Benjamin is destroyed. How does that come about? Well, guess where Gibeah is? Gibeah is right, oops, I hit the wrong button. Gibeah is right in this area here. And so these tribes, the 12 tribes, come together, and as they come together, the leaders of the people decide this is what we're going to do. They gather together their army. I want you to look at the size of that army. Chapter 20, verse 2. Is that rather large? Does anybody remember how large the tribe of Israel was when they came out of the land of Egypt? Tommy? How big? Oh, Chuck was hiding. I know Tommy knows this number too, okay? 600, how many, Tommy? How many, Chuck? 603,000. Now they got 400,000. Wonder how many Benjamites there are. And so now, here is this army of 400,000, and all they ask the Benjamites to do is to give us these people, give us these people from Gibeah. We'll handle that. And the tribe of Benjamin says, no way. They're a part of us. We are not going to give the Benjamites up to you. And so the Bible describes how that the armies come together, and verse 10 talks about the men who makes provision for the army, and they gather against the city. Verse 11, they send men throughout all the tribes of Benjamin saying, what is the wickedness that has occurred? Deliver up the men the perverted men who are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove them out of the land of Israel. The children of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brethren, the children of Israel. Instead, the children of Benjamin gathered together from their cities, Gibeah, to battle against the children of Israel. And from their cities at that time, the children of Benjamin numbered, you see that number there? There's an army of 400,000 Jews that are there. How many from the tribe of Benjamin? 26,000. That's remarkable. I guess they think we're going to win this battle. And there are also 700 others, so it'd be 26,700. And look at verse 16. How many left-handed men do we know are in the Bible? We know the name of one, and that's Ehud. But here is the left-handed men, and they could sling a stone at a hair's breadth and not miss. You're talking about marksmen. Can you imagine slinging that with their left hands and everything? And there's a hair down there, and you hit that hair dead center. So the people of God said, the children of Israel arose, they go to the house of God to inquire of God, and they said, which of us should go up first? And the Lord says, Judah. So the children of Israel rose up in the morning and encamped against Gibeah, and they come to fight against Gibeah. And the children of Benjamin, verse 21, come out of Gibeah, and on that day cut down the ground 22,000 Jews. Wow. They do pretty good. The people, that is, the men of Israel, encouraged themselves and formed the battle place they put themselves in array on the first day. All right, let's go a second time. Children of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until evening and said, shall I again draw near for the battle? And he says, go up. And the children of Israel approached Benjamin on the second day, and that day 18,000 of the Jews are slain. So now this army of 26,700 is killed. Is that 40,000 of the Jews? Then all the children of Israel, that is, all the people, went up and came to the house of God and wept there. They sat down before the Lord and fasted that day until evening. They offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. So the children of Israel inquired of the Lord, parenthesis, the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. And so there was a way they could ask questions of God, the Urim and the Thummim, and the Lord says, go get them. And so they go up and they destroy the tribe of Benjamin. They destroy the tribe of Benjamin. It's rather interesting. It's very likely the reason that they were defeated the first time was they did not ask God, shall we go up? They said, who goes first? That's pride. And they had to be humbled before they could learn some things, but that's a part of another sermon. But they destroy all of the Benjamites except 600 of them. And the 600 turn, and there's a rock, verse 27, at the rock of Rimmon for 4 months. And the children of Israel turned back against the children of Benjamin and struck them down from every city, man, beast, all that was found. They also set fire on all the cities. Uh-oh. There were 12 tribes, and now there are only 11 tribes. And so when you get to the next chapter, here are these individuals that suddenly recognize we have destroyed one of the tribes. And because there aren't any women. They got these 600 soldiers, and they haven't got any wives. And we have wiped out this entire tribe. There will not be. And they had made a vow, and evidently when they assembled together to first, and that is that we will not allow our daughters to marry these Benjamites. There is no way. When they got the 400,000 soldiers together, they said, we're not going to let them fight against the Benjamites. Not let them marry the Benjamites. So there's no way the Benjamites can have a wife, because they're not supposed to marry those who are not Jews. And so they've got a major problem. because they had made this vow, and you cannot go back on your vow. And they said, is there anybody, and I've had to hurry through this, is there anybody that was not there when the vow was made? And they discover that, verse 8, what one is there from the tribe of Israel who did not come to Mizpah to the Lord? And in fact, no one had come to the camp from Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. Now, they've not made the vow, but they have not come to the battle. And so these men are destroyed. The men of Jabesh Salem, or Jabesh Gilead, are destroyed. And all of the men are killed. And verse 11, you shall utterly destroy every male and every woman who has not known a man intimately. And so they kill all of them, but they find 400 young virgins who had not known a man intimately, and they bring these 400 virgins and give them to these 600 Benjamites. Anything wrong with that? I can give you 200 reasons, 200 things that's wrong with that. And so, to solve that problem, so they decide that at Shiloh, look in verse 19, there's a yearly feast of the Lord in Shiloh, and by the way, it's where the tabernacle is, north of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes from Bethel to Shechem. They instructed the children of Benjamin, saying, go up to where they have this feast, and whenever the daughters of Shiloh come out to perform their dances, come out from the vineyards, and every man catch a wife for himself from the daughters of Shiloh, and then go back to the land of Benjamin. And I think this, in fishing, you call it catch and release. I just, in my mind, you know, and so they find 200 of them. And it shall be when their fathers or their brothers come to us in the plain, we will say to them, be kind to them for our sake, because we did not take a wife of them in the war, for it is not as though you have given the women to them at this time, making yourself guilty of the oath. You vowed you wouldn't give your children, your wives to them as children, but give your children to them as wives, but they've taken care of it. You didn't do that, and so now all 600 men of the tribe of Benjamin now have a wife. Look at the map and look at the size of Benjamin and the size of Judah. That's remarkable, isn't it? One of the smaller tribes is the tribe of Benjamin. And God didn't give them a lot of land because this was going to be the outcome of this. So the tribe of Benjamin becomes almost a non-tribe. When the kingdom is divided, 10 tribes go to the north and become a part of the northern kingdom, 2 tribes go to the south. It is remarkable that as you read that account, it says, and Judah alone, because the Benjamites are hardly there. And now the Benjamites are there. They're one of the 2 tribes, but they're just an insignificant tribe, rather insignificant tribe. That will help you understand Saul's inferiority complex when God comes and says, King Saul, I want you to be king over Israel. And he said, I'm from the family of Kish and from Benjamin. What good can I do? Because I'm a Benjamite and we're really one of the weak tribes. Hope you've enjoyed studying this. These last 5 chapters, aren't they interesting? Just brings up all sorts of questions and everything. And so anybody that wants to know the answer to the question, just ask Joe Holland. He'll be able to answer every bit of this. Let's dismiss. You are dismissed.